Hi, it's Katrina. How much do we really know about the civilizations that came before us? They vanished without a trace, but their secrets are finally being revealed thanks to new technology and some recent discoveries. Today we'll be exploring some of the most mysterious ancient civilizations in history. The Kingdom of King Nimrod. Shortly after the Great Flood mentioned in the Bible, a man named Nimrod rose to power and started causing some serious chaos. King Nimrod was no ordinary guy. According to the good book, he was the first person to be described as a mighty man. But this wasn't exactly a compliment. Mighty can also mean tyrant, and that was Nimrod to a T. He didn't just want to be powerful, he wanted to rule over everyone. Even God himself. Big mistake, buddy. Huge! Nimrod was the grandson of Ham, one of Noah's sons, and he took his ambitions to new heights. He founded the city of Babel, a name the Babylonians would say meant Gate of God. But here's where it gets tricky. The name was later reinterpreted by the Hebrews to mean he confused, which might give you a clue about the chaos Nimrod caused. The name Babel is probably familiar, and that's because it's where the infamous Tower of Babel was built. You know, the ones that humans built to try to reach the heavens, and God said, nope, not today, and made them all speak different languages. Fun times! While the Bible doesn't say Nimrod built the tower directly, it does mention him as the founder of Babel. So most historians assume that he played a major role in the construction of this massive ziggurat. This wasn't just a tower. It was a symbol of humanity's rebellion against God, thanks to Nimrod's influence. King Nimrod wasn't content with just ruling over Babel, though. Oh no, this guy wanted to expand his empire. He conquered territories across Mesopotamia, establishing cities like Nineveh. He was basically the first empire builder, uniting people under his iron-fisted rule. Some say he even extended his kingdom into Assyria, building more cities there. Nimrod was a man on a mission to control everything and everyone. Some legends say that Nimrod was also a mighty hunter, not just of animals, but of people. The Bible's description of him as a hunter before the Lord likely means that he was ruthless against both beasts and his neighbors, treating them like prey. And if that's not enough, some myths even claim he was a dragon slayer, taking down the last of the dinosaurs that had survived the flood. Now that's a story you don't hear every day. Interestingly, many scholars believe that Nimrod wasn't just a biblical character. He may have been based on Sargon the Great, one of the first kings to establish a massive empire in Akkad, or modern-day Iraq. Both figures seem to match up in terms of timeline, achievements, and personality. They were described as ambitious, ruthless, and determined to carve out their own kingdom. But of course, Nimrod's empire didn't last forever. After his death, his kingdom fell into chaos, and eventually, different civilizations like the Amorites and later the Babylonians rose to power. Nimrod's empire was left in ruins, but pieces of it were discovered in the mid-19th century. What remained of Nineveh was found, including 2 mounds, a cemetery, and some ancient artwork. The city of Babel, however, has yet to be uncovered, begging the question, was it ever real to begin with? What do you think? Jomsborg. According to legend, there was once a stronghold filled with Viking mercenaries on the coast of the Baltic Sea. It was known as Jomsborg, and the people there were known as Jomsvikings. But was this place real, or was it all a tall tale? People have been searching for evidence of its existence for years, but nothing promising was ever discovered. Until recently. The hunt for the legendary Jomsborg just got way more interesting, thanks to a construction project on Hangman Hill, Wolin Island. Now, you might think a place named Hangman Hill would only have creepy vibes, and you'd be right. The spot was known for executions, human sacrifices, and ancient cemeteries. But instead of uncovering some gruesome bones, archaeologists stumbled upon something far more fascinating. They found a possible Viking stronghold, which might just be the infamous Jomsborg. You can picture Jomsborg as the medieval New York of the Viking world, according to some historians. It was a bustling trading hub where Vikings, Germans, and Slavs all hung out. They didn't just trade in goods like amber and salt, they also dealt in something a bit more sinister: slaves. The Vikings were running the Baltic coast, enslaving locals and selling them to faraway places like Morocco. For centuries, scholars have argued about whether Jomsborg even existed. Some thought it was just a fairy tale from ancient sagas, but recent finds on Hangman Hill, like charcoal wood fragments dating back to the 10th century, have archaeologists feeling like they are close to cracking the case. Dr. Filiopoviak believes they are about 80% sure they have found the real Jomsborg. Can you imagine being this close to solving a mystery that's been around for more than 500 years? According to old texts, Jomsborg was home to the Jomsvikings, a legendary group of elite mercenaries. They were sort of like the Navy SEALs of the Vikings, feared and respected across Europe. Over the years, people have tried to claim Jomsborg for various reasons. The Nazis, for example, were all over the idea of finding proof that Vikings and their so-called pure Nordic bloodlines were the dominant race during the early medieval period. After World War II, Poland kept up the search, hoping to reinforce their claim over the area by uncovering more evidence of a Viking presence. Fast forward to today, and Jomsborg fever is stronger than ever, especially with Viking culture being all the rage. Thanks to TV shows, movies, and video games, everyone wants to be a Viking. But the real-life Vikings were a bit different from their Hollywood counterparts. They weren't just blonde-haired, blue-eyed warriors who raided for fun. They were more complex, and their story is still being pieced together brick by brick, or rather, shard by shard. And fun fact, true Vikings never actually wore helmets with horns. Sorry to disappoint you, but you might have already known that by now. For now, the quest to fully uncover Jomsborg continues. But one thing's for sure, this legendary Viking stronghold is more than just a myth. And now for a quick break, because it's shoutout time! I want to give a huge thank you to Dean Age and Brendan Cornish for supporting this channel. Thanks so much for watching! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to join the Origins Explained family. Lemuria. Were there advanced civilizations on Earth long before we thought possible? That's what some people believe Lemuria might have been. But why? Listen to this and let me know what you think about the theory of Lemuria in the comments. The story of Lemuria, the most bizarre continent that likely never existed, begins with a small problem that Philip Sclater faced in 1858. Sclater was a respected scientist who studied biogeography, the study of species and ecosystems across time and space. And throughout his research, he noticed something strange. Lemur fossils had been found in both Madagascar and India. This was confusing because back then, Madagascar and India were part of two entirely separate biogeographical realms. So how did lemur bones end up in both places? What did Sclater do? He decided to create a whole new continent to explain it. He proposed that there had once been a massive land bridge connecting Madagascar to India, and he named this hypothetical continent Lemuria in 1864. And so Lemuria was born, at least in the imagination. Sclater's idea filled a gap in scientific thinking, but it also opened up a world of possibilities that went far beyond lemurs. By the mid-19th century, there weren't many new places left to discover, so people were excited by the thought of an entire lost continent. The idea of Lemuria sparked the curiosity of scientists and the public alike. Then, in 1870, German biologist Ernst Haeckel suggested that Lemuria might have been the birthplace of humanity itself. Forget Africa, Haeckel thought. Lemuria was where human civilization began. Things got even weirder when Helena Blavatsky, founder of Theosophy, which is a mystical and spiritual philosophy, incorporated Lemuria into her belief system in the 1880s. According to her, the people of Lemuria were part of the third root race of humanity, a concept that takes a hard turn into pseudo-scientific theory. Blavatsky and her fellow theosophist Charles Leadbeater claim to know all about Lemuria through astral clairvoyance, which are fancy words for mystical visions. Apparently, Lemurians were 15 feet tall, flat-faced, and reproduced by laying eggs. They could also walk backward as easily as they could walk forward, as if things weren't strange enough already. By the early 1900s, William Scott Elliot had expanded on this vision of Lemuria, describing its people in even more colorful terms. Meanwhile, in India, some nationalists and mystics started connecting Lemuria with Kumari-Kandam, a legendary lost land mentioned in Tamil literature. According to Tamil revivalists, Kumari-Kandam was a cradle of Tamil civilization that sank into the ocean. But that was just the beginning. In 1926, James Churchward gave Lemuria yet another makeover, renaming it Mu and moving it to the Pacific Ocean. Now Lemuria was not just a lost continent, but a central figure in myths about ancient advanced civilizations. In the American imagination, Lemuria found its home in Mount Shasta, California. Some believed that the survivors of Lemuria had retreated to live in underground cities filled with magic crystals beneath the mountain, popping out occasionally in flowing white robes. But by the 1960s, Lemuria was officially debunked when the theory of plate tectonics took the stage. This explained how continents drift. It turned out that India and Madagascar really had been connected millions of years ago, but not by a sunken land bridge. Instead, they had been part of the ancient supercontinent Gondwana. So, although scientific Lemuria was laid to rest, its mystical version lives on. Even today, the Lemurian Fellowship, founded in 1936, teaches the so-called wisdom of the ancient Lemurians. And in Southern California, Lemurians have their own spot in the local imagination, even if they are just legends told to children to keep them from wandering too far off. The decline of Cahokia. Long before Europeans set foot in the Americas, Cahokia was the largest, most bustling city north of Mexico. But around 1350, this grand city was mysteriously abandoned by the Mississippians, and no one knows why. So where did all the people go? At its peak, Cahokia was home to 10,000 to 20,000 people, making it about the same size as London back then. Located in southern Illinois, near present-day St. Louis, it was built by the Mississippians, a Native American group that occupied much of the middle and east of the United States. They were master urban planners. They used astronomy to align their city and build huge earthen mounds, one of which still stands today at 100 feet tall, covering 14 acres. It was a bustling metropolis, a pre-Columbian equivalent of Manhattan, drawing people from all over, like the Natchez, Pensacola, and Choctaw. Archaeologists discovered that about a third of Cahokia's residents weren't even local. So, essentially, this city was a big melting pot where cultures and customs mixed freely. It must have been a vibrant and cosmopolitan place to live, like the ancient New York. Cahokia wasn't just a random collection of huts. The Mississippians planned it carefully, laying out courtyards, homes, and public plazas. In the town center stood massive earthen mounds, including one known as Monk's Mound, where political and spiritual leaders gathered for ceremonies. They even built a wooden palisade around the city's core, almost 2 miles long. But why all the security? Cahokia was surrounded by peaceful neighbors, and there is little evidence of outside attacks. It turns out the real danger may have been within. Some believe that Cahokia was designed as a pilgrimage city, a place where people came for religious festivals and ceremonies. The city's alignment with the sun and stars hints that it was a spiritual center. But things weren't all sunshine and cornfields. The Mississippians practiced ritual human sacrifices. Archaeologists unearthed burial mounds filled with hundreds of bodies, many of them young women who were likely strangled and sacrificed. Men were found with their heads and hands cut off, and some had been clubbed to death. There were no signs of invasion or war, so it seems the violence came from inside. Talk about some scary internal politics. By around 1100, Cahokia had reached its population peak. Around 1350, it was a ghost town. So what caused the collapse? No one knows for sure. Some theories suggest climate change, drought, or resource exhaustion. Others think political unrest or social tensions could have caused the Mississippians to pack up and leave. The Mississippians simply walked away, and with them, Cahokia vanished into history. And here's the weirdest part. Cahokia doesn't even show up in Native American oral history. Whatever happened there, people didn't want to remember it. Cahokia's mounds still stand today, telling the story that its people left behind, however vague and confusing that might be. The area is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, attracting around 250,000 visitors a year. And still, nobody can say for sure why this place was abandoned. What possibly could have happened that was so bad in Cahokia to cause upwards of 20,000 people to pack up and leave? Let me know what you think in the comments. The Lost Race of Giants. The tale of giant skeletons found in North America sounds like a story made up by conspiracy theorists, but it's actually one of the most debated topics in archaeology. Imagine stumbling upon a skeleton twice as large as any person you've ever seen, buried deep in the earth. That's exactly what numerous reports from the 19th and early 20th centuries claim to have found. Skeletons belonging to a race of giants. These weren't just tall people. Some had extra teeth, oversized skulls, and jawbones big enough to fit around the face of a normal person. These so-called giants were reportedly discovered all across the United States, especially in places like the Ohio River Valley and along the Mississippi River. These areas were home to ancient cultures like the Adena, Hopewell, and the Mississippian civilizations, known for their mysterious massive mounds. You might ask what's so special about these mounds. Well, they often contained burial sites, and some of them reportedly housed these massive skeletons. One famous example comes from Kentucky in 1841. Workers digging on a farm found a skeleton so large that the thigh bone alone was 6 inches longer than that of any man in the area, and the jawbone could fit around a normal man's entire head. Over in Illinois, mounds were opened up to reveal skeletons buried in a sitting position, legs extending toward the center. Some skeletons measured a staggering 7 to 8 feet tall. And if you think that's shocking, there were also reports of double and even triple rows of teeth in some of these giant skulls. Another example of this lost race of giants was found in West Virginia. A burial mound uncovered there revealed a skeleton measuring over 7 feet long, and that's not even the weirdest part. In Brownstown, 2 skeletons were found together. One was over 7 feet tall, while the other was only 4 feet tall and deformed. This led to speculation that the giants might have lived among other strange beings. Were they friends? Enemies? It's hard to say. Florida brought its own giant to the party. One excavator was thrilled to find what he thought was the most massive skeleton he had ever seen, complete with an enormous stone axe nearby. But just as he began to study the skull, it crumbled to dust in his hands. What a bummer. Still though, based on the size of the bones, this couldn't have been the skeleton of a normal human. Louisiana has a history with giants as well. In a mound there, a skull was found with a whopping 40 teeth, 8 more than usual. Researchers were baffled. There was no way this could be the result of head binding or other artificial means. It seemed like these people were born this way, leading to more questions about their origins. That's only 5 states out of 50 in America with evidence of this lost race of giants. But who's to say that more proof can't be found in other places? Maybe we just need to look a little harder. So what happened to these giants? Some claim that the Smithsonian Institution, which handled many of these discoveries, quietly dismissed or covered up the findings. In the early 1900s, Alois Hrdlicka, a leading anthropologist at the Smithsonian, made it his mission to debunk the idea of ancient giants. He wrote off many of the discoveries as exaggerations, or the result of people's overactive imagination. After all, who wouldn't want to believe in giants? Hrdlicka said these so-called giants were nothing more than tall individuals, and that the stories had been blown way out of proportion. However, not everyone agrees. Many alternative historians and amateur archaeologists believe that the remains of these giants were real, and the denial by the Smithsonian was part of a larger effort to rewrite history. Whether or not the giants existed, their story has captivated people for generations. So, were there really giants roaming ancient America? Maybe, maybe not. After hearing about all these stories, though, what do you think? Let me know in the comments. The Cucuteni-Trypillian culture. The Cucuteni-Trypillian culture is one of history's great mysteries, and they had some pretty wild habits. They had this baffling tradition where every 60 to 80 years, they would burn their entire villages to the ground. These people intentionally set their homes on fire. But why on earth would they do that? Between 5500 and 2750 BC, this ancient society flourished in parts of present-day Romania, Moldova, and Ukraine. They were incredibly advanced for their time, building multi-story homes, breeding beautiful pottery, farming wheat and barley, and even working with copper tools. But despite their progress, they had this baffling and fiery tradition. Archaeologists have tried to figure out the reason behind it for centuries. At first, they figured maybe it was accidental. Lightning strikes, enemy attacks, or maybe the homes were just highly flammable. After all, houses made of wood, clay, and packed with grains and textiles are basically giant tinderboxes. But as researchers dug deeper, both literally and figuratively, they realized something strange. The burns were too consistent, too deliberate. It wasn't some random disaster. It was on purpose. And oddly enough, this phenomenon isn't exclusive to the Cucuteni-Trypillian culture. In fact, it happened across several ancient European cultures. So much so that archaeologists have given it a cool name, the Burned House Horizon. It stretched from Romania to Hungary, Serbia, and beyond, with multiple cultures seemingly obsessed with setting their homes ablaze. Why did they do this? There are a few theories. One theory suggests it was symbolic. Serbian archaeologist Mirjana Stevanovic believes the houses were burned for cultural or religious reasons. They could have symbolized death, turning from homes of the living into homes of the dead. Others, like Russian archaeologist Evgeny Krychevsky, thought it was a practical move. He argued that the flames hardened the clay walls into a ceramic-like surface, making the houses more durable, and even maybe fumigating them. It's like a prehistoric version of a home makeover, except instead of repainting, they used fire. Other researchers have tested these theories by burning things down, in the name of science, of course. In 1977, 2 archaeologists set fire to a house in Serbia to see what would happen. The result? The wooden roof burned away, but the clay walls stayed intact. This wasn't a fluke. Other experiments with historically accurate Cucuteni-Trypillian houses had the same outcome. So these burnings were 100% deliberate. And get this, it took a massive amount of wood to pull this off. For a 1-story building, they needed 130 trees worth of firewood, and for a 2-story one, 250 trees. If a whole village of 100 houses was burned, they would need to clear about 3.8 square miles of forest. The Olmecs. Do you think you could carve a giant head out of solid stone? It might seem hard for us today, but people were doing it thousands of years ago. But how did they accomplish such a thing without advanced tools? Before the Aztecs ever dominated Mexico, there were the mysterious Olmecs, a civilization so old and influential that they are often called the mother culture of Central America. The Olmecs lived from around 1200 BC to 400 BC, long before the Aztecs even got started, and their influence stretched far beyond their time. So who were these ancient people, and why do they matter so much? This civilization was discovered in the 1850s by a farmer while he was clearing forested land in Veracruz. He was just going about his business when all of a sudden he found a colossal head, a sculpture now known as Tres Zapotes Monument A. However, the Olmec culture remained unknown to historians until 1869, when Mexican traveler José Melgari Serrano published a description of the head. He described it after visiting the site for the first time in 1862, when the sculpture was still only partially excavated. And after years of research, a picture began to emerge of this mysterious culture. The Olmecs built their civilization along the southern coast of the Gulf of Mexico, in what are now the states of Veracruz and Tabasco. But let's talk about the real stars of the Olmec show, their colossal heads. These things are huge, standing between 3 and 11 feet tall and weighing tons. They all seem to represent older, powerful men with chubby cheeks, flat noses, and slightly crossed eyes. Some people think these might be depictions of Olmec rulers, which makes sense because it would take serious resources to carve these bad boys. At least 17 heads have been found, and they are some of the most iconic artifacts left by the Olmec. In reality, though, no one is 100% sure what these heads were for. Were they art, symbols of power, a kind of ancient propaganda? The mystery has yet to be solved. So what happened to the Olmecs? By 400 BC, they vanished, leaving behind a lot of questions. The acidic rainforest soil dissolved most of their skeletons, so even their physical appearance is a bit of a puzzle. But they weren't forgotten. Their name actually comes from the Aztecs, who came much later. They called them Olmec, meaning rubber people. Why? Because they were the first to make rubber and invented the famous Mesoamerican ball game that used a rubber ball. Even though the Olmec disappeared, their legacy lives on. They laid the groundwork for some of the greatest civilizations to follow. The lost city of Aztlan. Have you ever heard of the legendary homeland of the Aztec called Aztlan? Some people believe it's a real place, while others think it could just be another mythical city like Atlantis or El Dorado. But I want to know what you think. Listen to this and tell me your thoughts in the comments. The Aztec people created one of the most powerful empires in ancient America, but their origins are a bit mysterious. According to legend, their journey began in a place called Aztlan, an island that may or may not have existed. While searches have stretched as far north as Utah, no one has ever found proof of this fabled island. So what do the legends say about Aztlan? They tell of 7 tribes that lived together in a place called Chicomostoc, or the place of the 7 caves. These tribes later settled near Aztlan. One group, the Mexica, which later became known as the Aztec, were the last to leave. According to the story, they were possibly delayed by a lengthy drought, but they eventually left under the guidance of their god, Huitzilopochtli, who led them to their future empire in what is now Mexico City. Apparently, the god also made them change their name. In some versions of the story, Aztlan was a paradise. In others, it was a place ruled by cruel overlords from which the Aztecs had to escape. Either way, the place holds a special significance in Aztec history. One of the biggest mysteries surrounding Aztlan is its exact location. Some scholars believe it could be somewhere in the United States, but nobody has found it. The question remains, where did the Aztec come from? Where do you think archaeologists might find the ruins of Aztlan, if it existed at all?
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. Georgia Guidestones. Located at the highest point in Elbert County, Georgia, the Georgia Guidestones are a series of 6 granite tablets arranged in the shape of a star. On the stones are 10 instructions. Nobody knows who put them there, how to interpret the stones, or what to do with them. In 1979, a man wishing to conceal his identity hired a local granite finishing company to build a monument containing instructions for the re-establishment of society. Per the terms of a legal agreement, all of the structure's plans were to be destroyed upon its completion. This strange man, who went by the pseudonym R.C. Christian and had seemingly limitless money for the project, insisted on all information regarding his identity being strictly withheld from the public. Conspiracy theories about who he was abound, including rumors of the New World Order or Satanists being behind the Guidestones. These far-flung ideas have led to extreme vandalism, but have not brought anyone closer to identify who made the monument. The stories are engraved with a collection of rules that their anonymous commissioner believes humanity needs to follow in order to restore humanity in the aftermath of the apocalypse. A short message graces the top of the monument in 4 ancient languages: Greek, Babylonian cuneiform, Sanskrit, and Egyptian hieroglyphics. The rules themselves are written in 8 languages, including English, Spanish, Swahili, Hindi, Hebrew, Arabic, Chinese, and Russian. Included among the 10 guidelines are rules such as balance personal rights with social duties, be not a cancer on the earth, leave room for nature, and avoid petty laws and useless officials. Perhaps the most controversial statement is maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. Even today, all that we know about the anonymous sponsor is that they are, according to a statement on the monument itself, a small group of Americans who seek the age of reason. Many people hate the stones and fear that they are rules for the New World Order. In any case, there is an entire team of people trying to figure out what the mysterious stones are for. The Pyramids of Meroe. The Pyramids of Meroe are even more mysterious than the Great Pyramids found throughout Egypt. Further south, in the sandy desert of eastern Sudan, there are over 200 ancient pyramids along the banks of the Nile River. There are actually more pyramids in Sudan than Egypt. The pyramids here are much smaller, with narrow bases and steep angles on the sides, but they are just as intriguing. Most of them were built as tombs for the kings and queens who ruled the area between 2700 and 2300 years ago, during the Kingdom of Kush, which was part of Nubia. Very little is known about these ancient people or their mostly forgotten monuments. 3 Kushite kingdoms dominated Nubia for over 3,000 years. At the time of their construction, the city of Meroe was the capital of the Kush kingdom. You wouldn't believe it now by looking at the deserted landscape, the broken pyramids, and the lack of civilization. But back in 650 BC, this was a bustling city and a prosperous area that even beat back a Roman invasion. Nubians were quite wealthy and traded gold, ivory, ebony, and animals with a huge network that extended to the south and to the Mediterranean in the north. The Nubians and the Egyptians were constantly at odds, and the Egyptians conquered Kush during the New Kingdom era. The Kushites and Egyptians shared many cultural connections and worshipped the sun god Amun. As the New Kingdom ended, the Kushites rose and began using the traditional pharaonic headdress. Art and architecture from the time had many overlapping similarities. The city of Meroe thrived for centuries with its own royalty, trading systems, and alphabet and language. However, it slowly fell to raids and attacks, and then once the Romans took over Egypt, it was the beginning of the end. However, it was completely abandoned for unknown and mysterious reasons. The hieroglyphics left over by the Nubians have still never been deciphered, leaving their history a mystery. But even after the city fell and the kingdom of Nubia was mostly dead, the pyramids stood strong. That was until the 1880s, when an Italian explorer named Giuseppe Ferlini started searching for gold and began to smash them one by one. It's actually a miracle that some are still standing, even after thousands of years. The Lycian rock tombs. The Lycian rock tombs in Turkey are carved into the side of a mountain. On the outside, they appear to be imposing entrances to sacred temples hidden deep within the heart of the mountain. But instead, the entrances lead to tombs from the ancient Lycian culture, a people who once dominated the area. The Lycians believed that when a person died, they were carried to the afterlife by a mythical winged monster. To allow the winged monster to reach them more easily, they often buried their dead in places quite high up. This meant mountains and on the sides of cliffs. Some of the oldest tombs in the area are simply unmarked holes dug into the rock hundreds of feet above the ground below. The Lycian tombs located in the old city of Fethiye are significantly more impressive on the outside than on the inside. The entranceways are megalithic, with huge doors that look like they were made for giants. But beyond the doors, there is nothing but empty chambers cut into the rock. Because the tombs were so grand and easily visible, they were looted hundreds of years ago. By the time modern archaeology became a thing, all the treasures and bodies and whatever else was buried here had already been stolen, leaving a huge mystery of what the Lycian funerary rituals might have been like. Hoia Baciu Forest. There is no forest in the world more mysterious or more frightening than Hoia Baciu Forest in Romania, where warped trees and skeletal figures can be seen at all hours of the day in the perpetual darkness of the woods. Romania already has a reputation for being one of the most haunted places in Europe. People here have witnessed figures dancing in the dark, the shapes of hands reaching out from between the trees, and specters moving from bush to bush. The atmosphere is just as spooky even when there aren't ghosts roaming around. It's eerily quiet. Then suddenly there are footsteps from an unseen figure coming from everywhere at once. It's no wonder that Hoia Baciu is considered the most haunted forest in the world. But the forest here is more than just haunted. Some call it the Bermuda Triangle of Romania because people and things have been known to go missing in the area. Local legend states that a young girl vanished into the forest and then reappeared 5 years later, but she didn't remember where she'd been. And there's more stories of lost time, vanishing shepherds, supernatural occurrences, and even alien encounters. However, it's not all doom and gloom inside the mysterious forest. Before the sun goes down, it can be a pleasant natural area with plenty of trails for biking and hiking. Just be sure you leave before night falls, or you may be stuck inside the woods forever. Moeraki Boulders. The Moeraki Boulders in New Zealand can be found at the Cahokia beach, making it one of the most mysterious beaches in the world. The boulders along the coastline here are like stone planets dropped into the sand. All of them look perfectly symmetrical, giving the beach an oddly alien appearance, as though you've just landed on another planet. Some of the boulders are even embedded in the surrounding cliffs, looking like stuck cannonballs. According to the local Maori legends, the boulders have to do with how humans arrived on the island. When the original inhabitants of the island fled the mythical land of Hawaii, which, yes, sounds a lot like Hawaii, in their giant canoe, they were hit by a storm and they crashed into New Zealand. The hull of their canoe then became a reef, while their cargo was turned into stone spheres. Those stone spheres can still be found all over the beach today. In the science world, there is of course a different explanation. Scientists say the boulders are actually concretions which formed 60 million years ago from marine sediments. Each giant boulder began as something small like a shell or a fishbone, and as sedimentary particles slowly built up around the central object, the perfectly symmetrical orb of calcite and minerals became thicker and thicker until the Moeraki boulders turned into the big rocks that we see today. And now for number 5. But first, want to give a big shout out to Kevadonis and Waschent, who has been around since practically the beginning. We wouldn't be here without you. If you are new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go and join the Origins Explained family. The Skirrid Mountain Inn. The Skirrid Mountain Inn is one of the oldest and most mysterious pubs in all of Wales, with at least 900 years of history. But this isn't any ordinary history. The Skirrid Mountain Inn has a long and dark past of executions, witchcraft, and hauntings. The first mention of the pub came from documents in the year 1110. It was a place of entertainment for kings from both Wales and England, and some even say the pub was the very place where the Welsh ruler Owain Glyndwr started the revolt against Henry IV in England. The pub was a place of sanctuary for dying and wounded soldiers during wartime. In the 17th century, part of the inn was used as a court, and at least 180 prisoners were sentenced to death there. Often the execution would take place inside the dark and spooky inn, usually at the top of the staircase. Today, there is no shortage of paranormal activity detected inside the Skirrid Mountain Inn. Staff and visitors alike have reported hearing footsteps and ghostly laughter, experiencing dramatic drops in temperature, and witnessing scary shadows wandering up the stairs and through the corridors. One of the weirdest things that people still experience to this day is the strange perfume that seems to come from nowhere and is often accompanied by the faint swish of a woman's dress. Point Pleasant. There is nothing ordinary about Point Pleasant, West Virginia. It's one of the most mysterious towns anywhere in the United States. The history of horror began in November of 1966, when 5 men who were digging graves witnessed something terrifying. The diggers said they saw a humanoid beast flying very low over a nearby patch of trees. Nobody believed them, and the story was seen as nonsense. But just days later, 2 couples told the police that they also saw a bizarre creature flying low overhead while they were driving home. The creature had red glowing eyes and wings at least 10 feet from tip to tip. The creature followed their vehicle as they wound down the spooky West Virginia backroads, but when they pulled into town, the monster was gone. Here's where Point Pleasant gets even more mysterious. The creature was seen by numerous locals over the next handful of weeks, all of them describing the beast pretty much the same. People started calling it the Mothman due to its terrible likeness to a large moth with glowing red eyes. Then it was seen one last time on December 15, 1967. The beast was perched on the Silver Bridge. Just moments later, the bridge collapsed and 46 people were killed. Ever since, the accident has been directly connected to this mysterious monster, which was never seen again. Aurora Cemetery. The Aurora Cemetery in Texas could very well hold the most important grave in the entire world. The first thing you might notice on a visit to the mysterious cemetery is the plaque outside mentioning the grave of a spaceship pilot. If that seems unusual, that's because it is. But newspapers from the time reported that in April of 1897, an alien aircraft allegedly smashed into a windmill, was ripped to pieces, and its occupant was flung to the ground. The locals buried the alien corpse at the cemetery and made the plaque so future generations would know what happened. At this point, you're probably wondering if there's any proof of this. The answer is no. Roadside America reports that everyone agrees that the tombstone, if there ever was one, is gone now, and so there's nothing to see here. Scientists in 1972 tried to dig the grave up, but were blocked by the Cemetery Association under the rule that exhumations are only able to be done when authorized by the next of kin. Considering this is a space alien or a pilot who fell from the sky, there wasn't exactly an uncle or a third cousin around to give permission. Unfortunately, it's not even clear where in the cemetery the alien was buried. Something must have happened long before the story gained national attention. In 2010, a random tombstone appeared mysteriously in the cemetery, then vanished abruptly 2 years later. Have you heard of this story before? Anyone from Texas who has been to the cemetery? Let me know in the comments below. Charleville Castle. Charleville Castle is one of the most mysterious historical places in all of Ireland. It's located in what little remains of the primordial oak woods once inhabited by ancient druids. It was constructed in 1798 by Charles William Bury. To this day, the castle is hands down the finest example of Gothic architecture anywhere on the island, but it's also a haunting place full of nightmares and mystery. Visitors claim to have seen a little girl wearing a blue and white dress wandering through the halls. The girl has golden curls and blue ribbons in her hair. She's sometimes seen as a shadow burned into a photograph. She's sometimes witnessed in someone's peripheral vision. According to historical records, the girl could be the youngest daughter of the 3rd Earl of Charleville named Harriet. Harriet passed away tragically in 1861 at the young age of 8. Ever since, her presence has been felt by those who enter Charleville Castle, and sometimes you can hear her singing and laughing. Ape Canyon. Ape Canyon is a huge gorge just northeast of Mount St. Helens in Washington state. It's a mysterious patch of wilderness named after a horrifying attack in 1924 by an alleged pack of Bigfoot monsters. According to the old reports, it was a summer night in July when a small cabin filled with a group of miners came under siege by what they identified as wild ape men, horrifying creatures that were big and hairy like apes but looked just like men. All 5 of the miners survived the vicious attack, and each of them confessed the same story. The assault happened while they were asleep. The miners woke up to hear giant stones smashing against the walls of their wooden cabin. The stones were coming at them from all sides, so the men grabbed their weapons and ran outside and began shooting at monsters that they saw up in the hills. After they started shooting, the attack ceased, and when they let their guard fall, the attack began again. This went on until daybreak. While the apparent Bigfoot monsters never actually breached the cabin, the men did see them up at the edges of the canyon as the sun came up. They saw them clear as day, big, hairy, and ape-like. One of the men believed they had been attacked by beings from another world. However, most experts don't believe the miners were attacked by monsters, but were instead bombarded by a local group of youngsters who just appeared big and beastly and hairy in the dark. Unfortunately, after Mount St. Helens erupted in 1980, the area where the cabin once stood changed, and the exact site of the cabin has since been lost. Thanks for watching! Which of these mysterious places would you like to visit? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.